Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be again using alcohol markers to draw s'mores. Probably one of my top 5 desserts, but it's really hard to have them here in Japan because graham crackers are pretty much nowhere to be found unless you get them for like really expensive online. But yeah, maybe someday I'll find a good supplier of graham crackers. But yeah, today I decided to take a sketch that I had in my sketchbook, and I'd already started painting it digitally, and I just wasn't enjoying the process, and I left it for like a couple months, and I just felt like I couldn't get the brush big enough. Like I had to use really small brushes before whatever brush I'm using just started looking weird on the edges. But yeah, it wasn't super enjoyable and it was taking a really long time. So I decided, why don't we try again? We'll try on some Bristol board with alcohol markers and see if I enjoy the process more. And I really did. So I took a sketch and scanned it, and I traced it with my light board or tracing board. I mean, that's what Daiso called it, tracing board, onto the Bristol board with just a mechanical pencil, and then I lightened up the lines quite a bit. I didn't go in at first with colored pencil over the sketch because, I mean, like I've been doing recently, but I just wasn't sure. I was not so confident about these graham crackers and what I wanted them to look like. So I just went in with markers first. I started with the pearl white. You can actually see all my swatches at the top there, though I do add a couple more colors later on when I realized there were some things like I didn't want to go too dark or too light, so I wanted a sort of in-between color. But I started with the pearl white because it was the lightest, and I just worked from light to dark, trying to get the texture, trying to make sure you can see the light was coming from the left side. And by the end I think it turned out alright, especially after the colored pencil. But I think for the crackers in particular, that was the most difficult part. I just found myself unable, like I wasn't seeing enough contrast, which often is what happens to me when I start out with alcohol markers, and I usually get there by the end, but maybe I'm just impatient and I'm just afraid to go too dark too quickly. But it turned out all right. And so I do kind of just keep going back. Sometimes I'll take like a gray and go back over larger areas because it feels like I didn't make a whole big section dark enough, but you'll see that later on in the video. And I also didn't want to draw any straight lines either, because the cracker, neither cracker has straight lines at all. It's really crumbly. So, and I think for this photo shoot, I got this, where was this from? Pexels, I think. It's a royalty-free image. And I think they must have used a blowtorch because the edge of the crackers are also a little bit black. And I really liked that as well. I thought it brought in like a really cool like edge, dark edge. So that was one of the reasons I chose this reference image. This is actually from a photo of a stack of like 3 different s'mores. So I had to just crop the image and only pay attention to one of them. So it was kind of difficult to see the edge between this bottom cracker and these s'mores underneath it. But I hope it looks okay. I think you can at least tell it's the bottom of the cracker. Yeah, so this is a section where I think that was the yellow gray, and that's where I really wanted to add more depth. And as per usual with alcohol markers, they dry lighter than when you put them down, so I did go back in later, especially once I put in the chocolate and the marshmallows, but especially the chocolate because it's so dark. The crackers just looked a little too light, and there wasn't quite enough depth. So I do go in later with some darker colors. I am trying to get the edges quite dark underneath the marshmallows as well. But yeah, so I chose like a whole big range of like sandy, browny colors, relatively warm. And this one actually is more like a maroon color. It's like a really dark maroon, which pretty much looks brown, I think, to the eye. And that is the darkest color that I use, minus maybe the sepia colored pencil that I use later on. And obviously I saved those for the very edges, the burnt bits. And then for the marshmallows, part of the reason I didn't do this in my sketchbook where the sketch was is my sketchbook is cream colored, and I was like, the marshmallows are white, I don't have to bring in that much white. But then once I started going in, especially after I had put down the crackers, I was like, well, the marshmallows are largely in shadow as well, so maybe I could have gotten away with it, but I also was able to do this at a larger scale in the Bristol board, what do you call this, sketchbook, whatever, pad. So I think it was fine in the end, but I did go in with my lightest gray first, and then chose my second lightest gray to just go on top. And a really big part of this piece in particular was some edges were blended, but a lot of edges weren't. I did want a lot of sharp edges here to make it crispy, because it's crispy, like literally actually crispy from flames. So I was very strategic, very methodical about which edges I blended together, how much I blended them together, and then some edges I didn't. So especially as I go in with like the toasted part of the marshmallows, you'll notice that I don't even like flat, like I don't know how to describe it. I don't even like drag the marker over flat. I sort of dab to sort of make blotchy edges. I guess that sounds bad, but it's not bad, because you know, some parts are crispy, some parts are more blended. So you'll see that coming up. For now, I'm starting with the chocolate, and I again was afraid of going too dark too quickly, and I was noticing a lot of like lighter bits of brown sort of near the highlights that I wasn't sure I got a light enough color for. So this brown in particular I may have completely covered in the end, but it at least helped me like see where the chocolate was at first and gave me like a mid-tone to base my values off of, because it was just, I wasn't sure what I was doing when it was just all white. So yeah, I probably covered up that whole brown, probably didn't technically need it, but it helped me out quite a lot, I think. And I think despite the fact that in the reference image a lot of the chocolate is so dark and you have some really like sharp highlights, I think I was able to bring out a little bit more variety in values and make it a little bit more visible, because if I were to print this out in a smaller scale, like on memo pads or even just on a print, I think even if it's not so small, it's gonna look like a big dark blob, I think. So I think it translates better into print to make it some bits a little bit lighter. So of course I do add darkest darks where I need them, but I also just went ahead and like the mid-tone is just a little bit lighter than I think what I was seeing in the reference image, and I think it looks alright. It turned out okay, even though I felt like I was winging it. So yeah, I just spent some time going between various different colors, making sure the lightest parts stayed lightest. Actually, I love the fact that the lightest color there, it's called potato brown. So that's potato color. I agree, that is potato color. But I did use a lot of potato brown to blend out rather than using like a super dark color. I think it helped a lot initially to blend out with potato brown. And then as I was putting in this final darkest color, I was using my second darkest color to blend out, and then a few times I just honestly went like up the list from dark to light, blending, and then blending. So that was the chocolate. That was the process of the chocolate. There were some bits where you could tell in the photo the chocolate was starting to harden a bit, and there's a lot of shine on it as well. So I tried to make the crackly bits on those big drips sort of stand out by shading them a little bit, adding some like texture, and then later on I put the white on top. I do think that like second to the left drip is very satisfying, super satisfying if I dare say. And then these highlights seemed too light at first. I put in like the lightest gray I had, and then they just were not dark enough, so I went and grabbed another gray and I darkened them up a bit, left some spots lighter because even the highlights were sort of various values. And then it was time for the roasted or toasted part of each marshmallow blob. And this was fun. I went in with this color first. I made sure the edges weren't too clean. They were a bit rough because it was crackly. Then I went in with that initial gray color and I went all around the edges just to make sure it wasn't too stark. And then I just went again from light to dark. So put in some texture, tried to make it look like, you know, burnt sugar, the sort of crackly texture. And this is where I went in with that lighter color that I just did, and rather than blending everything super smoothly, I sort of blobbed it on so that there were some bits that were still like had sharp edges, like I said before, and some that blended in a little bit more. And then each time I just went in with a slightly darker color, just sort of following the reference to see like what more burnt parts were where. So that was really just the process there, just being methodical about where I put each spot, because I was doing both like the darker color of the sugar, of course, because it's burnt, but also the shadows around each of, you know, because when you burn sugar it bubbles up, so I had to do shadows around the bubbles as well. So yeah, it was interesting. Some things were shadows, but some darker things were also just the darker color of the marshmallow. So it was an interesting challenge, but I think it looks pretty convincing. And I went in very sparingly with the darkest color with the fine point. And then I'm just going back into those crackers because they just weren't dark enough for me in a lot of spots. Again, I mentioned this before, but once I put in the chocolate, which was the darkest parts, it really seemed a bit too light, but I still wanted to make sure there was some of the brightest parts where the light's really shining on it. So I think I got there, and then it was time to add a bit of colored pencil, mostly around the edges. I generally try to go like a little bit darker when I choose the pencil, like the outside color should be a little bit darker than the marker color, and that way when it sits on top it's actually about the same value. So for this one I wasn't quite into sepia yet. I think it was a slightly lighter one, and that's because I didn't really want line art. I just wanted the edges to be more clear. And then I did go in with the sepia. I think that's actually what I'm using here for the darkest parts, like the parts like the edge of the chocolate, and then the darkest shadows underneath the marshmallow where it meets the cracker. So I think it brought it out. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but the edges of the markers always kind of bleed at least a little bit, even on, it doesn't matter what paper you use. So it's nice to sharpen them up a bit with pencil of the same color, and sometimes darken up some things, lighten up some things as well with the pencil. And that's what I was doing here, actually, at the bottom of the cracker, just so you could see that was the bottom, and so the bottom edge should be darker. And after this, I went in with a white colored pencil. I took it from the Artix set first. Artix? I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that, but that one is not quite as opaque as my Holbein one. But as you can see here, it does lighten it up just a bit because there were some bits that I wanted a little bit lighter and some bits that I did want a pretty stark white. I didn't end up going in with any gel pen or paint pen this time. I didn't think it was really necessary. I think the Holbein pencil went in light enough, as you can see here. And I think it looks good. Definitely brought out that contrast that I was looking for before. So we're almost at the finish line. We're just about finished here. Just adding a little bit more texture, really getting where the light hits the most. And I believe that's about it. There we go. So thank you guys for watching. Please give this video a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Please leave a comment also, because I would love to talk to you. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!